There is no glory in this kind of war. There is only the coral, the sand, the volcanic ash, and the blood. In the vast expanse of the Pacific, America's war against the Empire of Japan was not a war of sweeping maneuvers. It was a brutal, inch-by-inch grind against an enemy that would not surrender. And at the tip of this bloody spear was one of the most ferocious fighting forces in modern history: the United States Marine Corps. Today, we are breaking down the 5 most insane, most brutal, and most legendary marine assaults of the Pacific War. Ranking these battles is a difficult task, as everyone was a testament to human endurance. Our ranking is based on 3 factors. First, strategic importance. How critical was the objective to the island-hopping campaign? Second, brutality and cost. We're looking at the casualty rates and the sheer horror of the fighting. And third, legendary status. How has this battle been immortalized in the history of the Marine Corps? Before we begin, we must give an honorable mention to the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War, the Battle of Okinawa. While it was a 10th Army operation, the Marines of the 1st and 6th Divisions played a central, brutal role in capturing the southern third of the island. They fought for objectives like Sugarloaf Hill and the Shuri Line in some of the most horrific, attritional warfare of the entire war. It was a meat grinder that showcased the insane courage of the Corps, and it just narrowly misses our list because the operation as a whole was not exclusively a marine assault. Kicking off our list at number 5 is the one that started it all, the place where the legend of the modern Marine Corps was truly forged in fire and blood: Guadalcanal. In August 1942, the 1st Marine Division landed to seize a critical, half-built Japanese airfield. The landing was easy. Holding it was hell on earth. For 6 agonizing months, the Marines were cut off, starved, and ravaged by disease. They endured nightly naval bombardments and relentless suicidal banzai charges from elite Japanese troops. The fighting for the airfield, Henderson Field, and key terrain like Edson's Ridge was a desperate, primal struggle for survival. As Marine veteran Robert Leckie wrote, they were a handful of men, fighting a war that was a blot on the face of the earth. Guadalcanal was the first major Allied offensive against the Empire of Japan, and it was the definitive turning point of the Pacific War. The Marines on that island stopped the Japanese war machine cold and proved it could be beaten. For turning the tide through sheer grit and endurance, Guadalcanal earns the 5th spot on our list. At number 4 is the battle that broke the inner defensive ring of the Japanese Empire and sealed its ultimate fate: the Battle of Saipan. In June 1944, the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions were tasked with seizing this critical island. Why? Saipan's airfields were close enough for America's new superweapon, the B-29 Superfortress, to begin bombing the Japanese mainland. The Japanese knew the stakes and defended the island with a fanatical desperation the Marines had never before witnessed. The fighting devolved into a brutal cave-by-cave slaughter. Marines had to clear hundreds of caves with flamethrowers and explosives, facing an enemy that was deeply dug in. The battle culminated in the largest banzai charge of the war, where over 3,000 Japanese soldiers, many of them wounded and armed only with bayonets on sticks, charged the lines of the Army's 27th Infantry Division in a final suicidal attack. But the true insanity of Saipan was witnessing the depth of Japanese propaganda. Convinced that the Americans were barbarians who would torture them, thousands of Japanese civilians, including women and children, tragically took their own lives by jumping from the island's high cliffs. The Marines, who tried desperately to stop them, were left horrified. For its strategic importance and the psychological horror it revealed, Saipan was an insane and pivotal assault. At number 3 is a battle that was, minute for minute, one of the most savage and costly in Marine Corps history. The assault on the tiny 2-mile-long island of Betio in the Tarawa atoll. The plan for the 2nd Marine Division was simple. A massive naval bombardment would obliterate the defenses, and the Marines would walk ashore. The plan failed. A disastrously low tide meant the landing craft got stuck on a coral reef hundreds of yards from the beach. The Marines were forced to abandon their vehicles and wade ashore through a murderous crossfire from deeply dug-in Japanese machine guns. The first waves were annihilated. The water turned red. Colonel David Shoup, who would earn the Medal of Honor here, famously radioed, "The issue is in doubt." For 76 horrific hours, the Marines fought with unbelievable savagery to gain a foothold, crawl over a seawall, and destroy over 4,500 elite Japanese naval infantry who were sworn to fight to the last man. And they did. Of the entire Japanese garrison, only 17 prisoners were taken alive. Tarawa was a brutal lesson, paid for in blood, that taught the Marines how to conduct future amphibious assaults. The footage was so shocking that its release was initially controversial in the States, but it showed the American public the true, insane cost of victory. Coming in at number 2 is an assault so brutal and so controversial, it was effectively erased from the memory of the American public. The Battle of Peleliu. In September 1944, the 1st Marine Division, the veterans of Guadalcanal, were sent to seize another airfield. It was supposed to take 4 days. It took over 2 months. At Peleliu, the Japanese changed their tactics. They abandoned the suicidal banzai charges. Instead, they created a defense in depth, turning the island's jagged coral ridges into a fortified honeycomb of over 500 interconnected caves and pillboxes. This was a new kind of war. As Marine veteran Eugene Sledge wrote in his memoir, "With the old breed, the fighting was a struggle of primitive beasts, fought with a savage, brutal hatred. The fighting on ridges named Bloody Nose and in a valley called Death Valley was some of the most vicious of the entire war. The 1st Marine Division was effectively destroyed as a fighting unit, suffering a casualty rate of nearly 40%. To make matters worse, the strategic value of the island was later deemed negligible by military command. For its sheer, unrelenting savagery and the heartbreaking pointlessness of its sacrifice, the forgotten hell of Peleliu stands as one of the most insane assaults in history. And at number 1, the battle that has become the defining image of the United States Marine Corps and of the entire Pacific War. The Battle of Iwo Jima. In February 1945, 3 Marine divisions, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, were tasked with seizing the 8 square miles of volcanic ash and rock that was Iwo Jima. Its airfields were needed as an emergency landing strip for crippled B-29s returning from Japan. From the moment they hit the beach, the battle was a nightmare. The volcanic ash made it impossible to dig proper foxholes, and every inch of the island was pre-sighted by Japanese artillery, mortars, and machine guns, hidden in a vast 11-mile network of underground tunnels commanded by the brilliant General Kurabayashi. There was nowhere to hide. This wasn't a battle of maneuver. It was a battle of annihilation. For 36 days, the Marines fought and died to destroy a garrison of 22,000 entrenched Japanese defenders. It was the only battle in the Pacific where American casualties outnumbered the Japanese. The fighting was so intense and the bravery so commonplace that Admiral Nimitz himself would say of the Marines on Iwo Jima, "Uncommon valor was a common virtue." The famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi occurred on just the 5th day of a battle that would grind on for another month. But the sacrifice was not in vain. Over 2,400 B-29s would make emergency landings on the island, saving the lives of nearly 27,000 American airmen. For its iconic status, its unimaginable cost, and the sheer concentrated valor it required, the Battle of Iwo Jima is the #1 most insane and legendary marine assault of the war. Guadalcanal, Saipan, Tarawa, Peleliu, Iwo Jima. These are more than just battles. They are sacred ground in the history of the Marine Corps. They represent a level of sacrifice and courage that is difficult for the modern mind to comprehend. They were the bloody price of victory in the Pacific. But what do you think? Did we get the order right? Is there another battle you think was even more insane? Let us know in the comments below. We honor the memory of these men by studying their history. If you appreciate this kind of historical deep dive, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching.